In your daily training, you work on getting your punches right, getting good at different combos, and going over tactical cadences again and again. But when you're in an actual fight, it's tough to figure out exactly when and how to use those cadences. That's why it's key to have a plan for which cadences you're going to use and in what order during the fight. We call this plan a strategy. In boxing, there's this technique called feints. It's not super strictly defined, but usually it's about doing some kind of tricky move to mess with the timing of your punch or to get the opponent to make a move. We can call these kinds of moves tactical feints. Apart from what we just talked about, there's another kind called strategic feints. These are about making your opponent think you're going to do something specific next. Like maybe they start expecting a 1-2. By setting up this expectation, you can surprise them and get in a good, clean hit. To pull off strategic feints, you've got to use not just one, but a bunch of different cadences to build up what your opponent's thinking. But the way we do our notations in sheet boxing right now doesn't really let us show a whole series of these tactical cadences. Also, it looks like music theory hasn't come up with a way to show how you can play with someone's expectations and then flip them on their head. So, we're going to borrow a way of describing this from the world of system design instead. When you're setting up an IT system, you've got to think about all sorts of changing situations. It's not just simple, like a calculator where you put in numbers and get a sum. To handle these complicated cases, it's really helpful to lay everything out in a diagram. That's why they came up with something called state machines. For folks who aren't really into IT, getting the hang of what a state machine is can be made easier by comparing it to stuff we deal with every day. A state machine is a great tool for showing how a strategic feint works. It first makes your opponent believe one thing, and then surprises them by doing something else. Let's start by getting to know the basic rules that state machines follow. The black circle on the left side is where the state machine starts. Then, the double circle on the right is the end point, showing how the machine moves from beginning to end. The arrows you see in the diagram tell you which way to go, and it's not always just straight ahead. Sometimes it branches off or goes around in a loop, depending on what's happening. The diagram up there is showing how a boxer does a 1-2 combo over and over.
I've broken down the strategies into 5 types. Now using boxing notes and a state machine to show this stuff might be new to a lot of people. But if you've done some sparring, you've probably already thought about the ideas behind all this. So instead of getting caught up in how different the notation looks, try to think about it in terms of matching up the traps you already know with each of these 5 categories.
In chess, there's a tactic called fork. It's when you move your pieces in a way that they're both threatening 2 of the other player's pieces at the same time. This sets up a situation where at least one of those threatened pieces is going to get captured, no matter what. Just like that, in boxing, a fork is a strategy where you give your opponent a tough choice between option A and B. This makes them slow down and think about what to do. The strategy state machine example here shows 2 options for your opponent, either a jab or a lead hook. The strategy state machine we've got here shows 2 ways you can go with a straight right in a 1-2 combo. You can aim for the head or go for the body. This state machine lays out a plan where you start with a jab as the first part of a 2-punch combo. Then, for the second punch, you either throw a straight or a lead hook. The third blow strategy is about hitting with a third combo that's different from the first 2 options you showed the opponent. This catches them by surprise, right when they're trying to decide what to do next. The example here shows a strategy where you make the opponent choose between a jab and a lead hook. Then, when they're stuck trying to decide between these 2, You take advantage of that hesitation and go in with a 1-2 combo. The strategy in this example gives two choices for a 1-2 combination. You can either do a straight punch to the head or to the body, and then follow it up with a jab and an overhand. The strategy outlined here aims to make your opponent unsure about whether you're going to throw a straight jab or a lead hook. Then, when they move their glove to guard against the lead hook, you take that moment to hit with a lead uppercut.
When you're actually using the strategic state machine in a fight, you shouldn't stick too strictly to the sequences, just as they are in the sheetboxing. What you want to do is add in other combinations before and after, so that each move fits into a smooth, tactical cadence. Like, if we're thinking about how to use that third blow strategy in a real fight, here's an example of what you shouldn't do. So, instead of just doing the moves exactly as they're shown in the strategy state machine, you need to make them work better in a real fight. You do this by putting other combinations before and after the ones in the notes, turning them into tactical cadences that actually make sense in the ring. Here's an example of the right way to put this into action.
An augmentation strategy is all about getting one step ahead of what your opponent thinks you're going to do by suddenly making your combos more intense or throwing in more moves. So, what you do is get your opponent ready to expect a certain combination and then catch them off guard by doing a bigger, more powerful version of that same combo. In the example we have here, the aim is to make the opponent watch out for the jab. Then, when they're focused on that, you take advantage and go in with a 1-2. In this example, the idea is to make your opponent wary of a 1-2. After throwing the 1-2, you'll then quickly follow up with a jab. In the sideways strategy, you make the opponent feel like they're in danger from a certain combo, which gets them to defend themselves. Then, you use an attack that's a bit like the original combo, but different enough to trick the opponent and get around their defense. In the example coming up, you put pressure on your opponent with a 1-2, making them put up their guard in front. Then, you take advantage of that by using an overhand to sneak past their front guard and land a punch. In the example we're looking at, you get your opponent worried about the lead hook. Then, when they're focused on defending one side, you duck to the other side and aim for a body shot. In the next strategy, called Pretender, you pretend to be a less skilled boxer. Basically, this strategy is about making moves that clearly show your intentions to the opponent, making them think they know what you're going to do next. Then, you surprise them by doing something different from what they were expecting. The next example is about making it really obvious that you're going to do a 1-2. This baits the opponent into trying to counter you right after your strike. Once you block their counter, you're all set up to hit them back. Just like that, there's another pretender strategy where you make it look like you're definitely going to use a 1-2. This tricks your opponent into countering, but then you quickly step back, making some space between you two. Now you're out of reach of their straight punch, which puts you in a good spot to throw a straight punch back at them.
Both the sideway and pretender strategies kind of use the same setup. And sometimes, the moves are almost the same. But what really sets them apart is how the opponent sees what's happening. With the sideway strategy, your opponent feels like they're under threat from your combo, so they tend to defend more passively. On the other hand, in the pretender strategy, you're counting on your opponent not taking the threat seriously, which makes them go for an aggressive counter. It might sound a bit fuzzy to separate two similar strategies based on how the opponent reacts, but any boxer who's done some sparring gets how there's a real sense of feeling, either more or less in control than the opponent. This sense is key to telling the difference between the sideway and pretender strategies, just like we lay out in the mapping of strategies.
The names and details of the strategies I've talked about here aren't widely known or accepted. What I'm trying to do in this series is to use boxing notes and state machines to show tactics and strategies in a visual way that's not usually done in writing. I really recommend taking a close look and thinking critically about what's being presented. Also, it might be helpful for you to use boxing notes as a way to neatly sort out and think about your own boxing experiences.
In the talks about strategy, we've been assuming that if you keep doing the same combo, your opponent will start to react in a way you can predict. But in real fights, doing the same thing over and over can actually be pretty risky. It could give your opponent a chance to hit you back before they've even really figured out what you're planning. So, it's really important to use tactics that stop your opponent from being able to hit you back while they're still trying to guess what you're going to do next. Let's take an example where you keep using a 1-2 combo to set up for either an augment strategy or a sideways strategy. First off, we call a basic 1-2 a prototype. If you keep doing exactly that same move, there's a big chance the opponent will hit you back. So, you switch it up with a different version, which we call a variant. There are a few examples of variants here. 1, you could throw in a casual jab before the prototype. 2, you could change up the timing by adding a little fake out or tactical feint at the beginning of the combo. And 3, you could do the whole thing from a safer distance where you won't get hit back. If you're up against someone who's just starting out in boxing, showing them the same combo 2 times in a row can really set them up to expect that move again. Then, on the third go, you can throw in a strategic feint. But if you're facing someone more experienced, like an intermediate or advanced boxer, they might try to hit you back on your second try. So, you've got to figure out how many times you need to repeat your move to make them think they know what's coming. Plus, when you do repeat a combo, picking the right variant is super important so you don't get hit back.